it just dawned on me really quick. This isn't the official sermon, but the final song is going to have some Hebrew words that many of you might not know, and I was going to work on helping everybody say these, but I have an illness called round-to-it-ism. And so my wife is very familiar with that illness. So there's one word called E-L-E-L-Y-O-N. It's Elion. Elion. And another word, E-R-K-A-M-K-A. And that word I'm having a hard time pronouncing. So hopefully our music leader and our pianist and a few others know how to say it. But the Lord knows what you're singing, even if you don't get it right. So no worries. And now for our message. So we are in Ruth chapter 4. And I was thinking this week, it's right there in the Old Testament. Right there. And you remember from Genesis chapter 3, 14 through 15, right after Adam and Eve had sinned in the garden. And God said, the Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise your heel. This, in my opinion, is one of the darkest days in human history, is when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden. All of humanity is, from that point, is infected with the sinful nature. All of humanity is affected with sin. And the result of that sin is down a path that is very, very dark, down a path that is in hell, unless something happens. So in Genesis 3 is a small glimmer of hope. And I believe that book of Ruth, as the promised plan of God goes through the Old Testament, that book of Ruth is a beautiful book that symbolizes that promised plan, that symbolizes what Jesus does or did for us on the cross as our Redeemer. So we have that little book in there. It's kind of like an anchor. And God is saying, I'm still working. I'm still working. And now, when Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, this might be my go-to verse, John 1:12. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. And so now, the ball is in our court. If we believe, if we receive, we are children of God. It seems so simple, doesn't it? But yet so complex. We read it through a passage in Acts chapter 13 this morning in Sunday school. It talks about how even though it's so simple, people still will not believe. And now for Ruth chapter 4. So we left off our story. I know you were really wanting to know what was going to happen last week. It's like a cliffhanger. So Ruth and Naomi are waiting. They're waiting for this meeting with Boaz and the Redeemer. Whatever will happen. And I was thinking about waiting. I gave my Instapot story last week. It's true, I don't have patience. I am working on it. But I'm really reminded in Jeremiah 29, 10 through 13. It says, for thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you. I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to the place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I use this passage because Ruth and Naomi were waiting, and it must have seemed like a long time, even though it was short. The exiles in Babylon were waiting. They were waiting. And many times we wait and we wait upon God. But his plans for us as well are amazing. And now to Ruth 4:1-2. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat. The city gate was the place to be. It was where all the business deals occurred. And now Boaz, who I don't think had round to it ism, headed to the city gate, and he got there early. And I envisioned him just sitting there and going, "Hey, Redeemer, come, sit down." And then he got the 10 elders. "Hey, come on, sit down." And we don't know the Redeemer's name, which I find odd, but I think it's a literary device right there to almost shun this Redeemer. It gives us a hint before it even happens what's going to happen. Now we know what we want to happen. If you've ever watched a Hallmark movie or any other type of movie where there's two characters, you know they should be together. There was this television series called Doc, and there was Doc played by Billy Ray Cyrus and this nurse. The whole series, they were really good friends. And you kept thinking, they have to be together. And lo and behold, the last episode of the last season, they finally became husband and wife. So we're cheering, at least I am cheering for Ruth and Boaz. But at the same time, it was shunned upon for the next in line to not fulfill their duty. So now we go to Ruth 4:3-4. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Amalek. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders of the people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it. And I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." He gave the whole history of what went on, of how, and everybody knew that Ruth and Amalek and Mahlon and Chilion headed to Moab because there was a famine in the land. And they also knew that Naomi came back with Ruth to Bethlehem, empty-handed, no Amalek, no Mahlon, no Chilion, and she called herself bitter. And then the rest of the story, Ruth goes to the field, she becomes friends with Boaz, he just does amazing kind things to her, and then she goes to the threshing floor, and Boaz says, "Yes, I will redeem you, but there's somebody who is closer." So he tells the whole story, and this guy's like, "Sure, why not? I'll buy the land." It's easy enough. Easy enough. But before I begin with the answer, I'm reminded about church history. I'm reminded about how dangers lurk when it becomes very easy to become a Christian. So, when I read the next section, you might think, oh, that Boaz, he's one sneaky guy. But really, it's going to show a level of commitment on the Redeemer's part. Can he commit or not? So in church history, I was telling that it used to be against the law to become a Christian in Roman times. Nero was a famous Roman emperor who persecuted Christians. But then along came Constantine, who was a Roman ruler. And he made it legal to become a Christian, which everybody thinks, wow, we're not going to be impaled on stakes anymore. We're not going to be burned alive in a garden. But when he did that, he infused Christianity with Roman traditions, Roman cultures, and thus we have the Roman Catholic Church. Now some people would say the Roman Catholic Church started with Jesus, and that is not true at all. The Roman Catholic Church started because Rome decided to really water down Christianity, put all of these Roman traditions. And then in the 16th century comes Martin Luther. So it would be like somebody doesn't think what we're doing is right at all. So one day you come to the church door and you see, I don't know if you can nail anything to the door, but Martin Luther nails 98 thoughts to the church door based on Scripture. Revolutionized things. That is the start of the Protestant Reformation, 1517 to 1648. And that refers to the widespread religious, cultural, and social upheaval of the 16th century Europe had that broke the hold of the medieval church, allowing for the development of personal interpretation of the Christian message and leading to the development of modern nation state. So that brings us to the present time. It's easy to say I am a Christian. If you look at the polls, a large percentage of people in the U.S. will say they are Christian. But if you look at the polls most closely, less and less will say they are born-again Christians who identify as a believer in Jesus Christ. So I think that this parallels to this next statement so much. It is not a sneaky way that Boaz used to get his way, but it shows a commitment. Ruth 4, 5 to 6. Then Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Not trickery at all. Boaz needed to know, can this Redeemer commit? And he said, I can't risk my own inheritance. So now things are indeed looking up for Ruth and Boaz. But at the same time, I cannot but help feel a bit of sadness for this Redeemer who is unwilling to commit. Ruth 4:7. Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting Israel. Now, this may seem really odd, but this came straight from Deuteronomy. I was going to demonstrate the sandal with somebody, but I'm not wearing sandals. And if I practiced this a few times, flipping my shoe in the air, and I only caught it like once. So just imagine. But Deuteronomy 25, 7 to 10. Now this is just really, really wild. Which says, and if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband, brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. And if he persists, I do not wish to take her, then the brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of the elders and pull off his sandal off his foot and spit in his face. And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of his house should be called in Israel, the house of him who has his sandal pulled off. The Redeemer just couldn't commit. And what blows my mind is they even spit in his face, which I will also not demonstrate. This parallels even to the sower and the seed. And you remember in the sower and the seed, certain seed fell on rocky ground. I mean, eventually it fell in fertile ground and it grew. But the truth of the matter is, people have an opportunity to believe in Jesus, and that seed falls, and the cares of the world are just too much. Maybe money is too much. They just don't want to change their life. I don't want to give up my parties. I don't want to give up my language. I don't want to give up going and drinking every night. I mean, the list goes on and on. I was told of a story by a guy this week. He said, my wife and I, when we got married, we did not have an open bar. And the guy doing the wedding, because they did have like a little dance, the guy's like, I can't believe it. All these people had so much fun and no alcohol. It is just mind-blowing, right? But the truth be told, people who think they want to be free, they are slaves to sin. I'd rather be a slave to righteousness than a slave to sin. Being a slave to sin is not going to be pleasant. Friends, heaven and hell are real. I know, and to some it's going to be a devastating shock. I often hear the comments like, so-and-so doesn't have their mind anymore, but when they get to heaven, the problem is we can't promote people to heaven. The problem is we can't demote them to hell. Only God knows the heart. But we can be guaranteed that if you are not a follower of Jesus, your name won't be in the book. And the pain and the suffering will not end at death. It will continue. So this next section is about confirmation of the deal that had just been made. Ruth 4, 8 through 12. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders of all the people, you are witnesses this day that I brought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have brought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers, and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day, that all the people who were with the gate and elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into the house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthy in Ephrath and renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be that of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give to you by this young woman. The confirmation has been done. And they all said, yes, yes, we are witnesses. And let the blessing start. May you be like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel. In other words, they're saying, may you have many, many, many babies. And I'm just like awestruck. So there's a story about Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. If you're familiar with the Old Testament story of Tamar and Judah, that is mind-boggling. So Judah had 3 sons. And so Tamar married the first son, but he was evil and wicked. And so he died. So now you got another son whom Tamar married. We'll just say he did things that were not good. I believe it's in Genesis 38, so you can read that for yourself. So I'm giving you the censored version. So he died. Comes number 3. At this time, Judah's like, whoa. Hey, you know what? My son, he's not old enough for you to marry. Just sit and wait. I'll hook you up with him. But Judah's thinking, there is no way that he is ever going to be with Tamar, because this is evil and wicked, and he's going to die too. So time goes on, and Tamar's in another city, and she hears that Judah's coming to the city. She takes off her mourning clothes. She puts on these other clothes to kind of disguise her identity, and she hooks up with Judah. I know. And Judah's like, what can I do to give you? She's like, I would like a goat. Not my first choice, but she wants a goat. But Tamar's like, what can you do to give me? So he gives her this ring and this walking stick, I believe, for collateral. So when Judah comes back to the city, he's like, where's this shrine prostitute? And they're like, we don't know. Eventually, they all figure it out. And this story is right in here. And it gives birth to Perez. And what I'm saying is, God is in control. He takes something really, really bad, and he is still in control. And the family line continues. Nothing is going to stop God. And I find another parallel between Ruth and the Gentiles. Ruth was a Moabite. She was not a Jew. Yet she got married to Boaz. I know it's a spoiler. We haven't come to that part yet. And I parallel that to the Gentiles. We find in Romans 11 through 12. So I ask, did they stumble in order that they might fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion means? I would love to continue with Romans 11, but I'm told, well, there really isn't a window to fall out of if I preach 4 hours. But point of it is that it's just amazing. The Gentiles were grafted in, according to Romans 11. And one day, Israel is going to become important. That's why we need to pay attention and pray for Israel. We need to pay attention to what goes on. I believe that Israel is a gauge that we can watch in terms of end times prophecy, which I believe we're actually getting closer and closer every day. But the potential is wide open now for people to come to faith. Jesus says the harvest is huge, but the workers are few. It's like the harvest is huge in Illinois, but we don't have many farmers to combine the fields. So we need more farmers to combine the fields because the harvest is huge. And now Ruth 4:13 to 17. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, whom loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse and the father of David. They got married. Can you believe it? Boaz and Ruth. It has happened. This is like a totally amazing story. It's a love story that ends beautifully. But it's more than that. It's a story of a redeemer. It's a story about Jesus and how he redeems us. There's nothing we can do to be redeemed. We are saved by grace, the grace of God. Nothing we can do. It's a rags to riches story. It's a story orchestrated by God. It's a story of God is always working. Always working. And it's a story about a baby. One thought in my brain was, hey, I'm going to make a baby shower announcement for Ruth and Boaz and say, hey, under your seat is a baby shower announcement. But it is so cool. They had a baby, and his name is Obed. And it continues the genealogy. Ruth 4:18 to 22 says, "Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered King David." It is a priestly line. And if we read beginning of Matthew, it gives an even longer genealogy. But it's like suddenly the Old Testament just goes kaboom. And you see this. You see how God is working. The story of Ruth is a wonderful story full of the promised plan of God that started in the book of Genesis with the fall. And one day the full culmination will come to full circle, found in the second to the last chapter of the book of the Bible. I wanted to read Genesis 22, the whole chapter, but I decided that Revelation 21, 1 through 4 is just wonderful. "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. Wow. So my message today was entitled Eden Restored. When man failed in the garden, God issued a promise found right away in Genesis 3:14 through 15. And the book of Ruth is right in there, clinging to that promised plan of God, which happens when Jesus is born and when he died on the cross and rose again and satisfied the punishment of sin for anybody who would believe in him and receive him. He would give him the right to become children of God. So even in our mundane lives, even on Monday morning, God is working. Even on Wednesday morning, God is working. God is working all the time in our lives. And we can cling to that hope. That hope is a wonderful thing. And we need to cling to it. Life is going to bring about events that are not going to be fun. Life is going to bring about hard events. But we always have that hope found in Jesus. So my challenge today is to cling to that hope and to share that hope with others, because the harvest is very large. And I believe we are coming closer and closer to the end. Let us pray.